Hello, good afternoon. Sir has joined.
Yes, ma'am. Good
Ravichandra
afternoon.
sir,
I'm here. I'm here.
I'm not able to see him, sir. He has joined.
Ma'am, I have joined. Can you confirm if I'm audible to you?
Acha, he's there. But his voice is not clear.
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Thank you.
Oh, I don't have my headphone.
No, no.
Good afternoon, sir. Ravichandra sir.
Good afternoon, ma'am. How are you?
I'm not able to hear him. Yeah, but it will echo if you.
I'm audible now, ma'am? Yeah, thank you.
A very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to this post third day, ninth session of Dr. Ravichandran. It's a real high privilege for me to introduce this great personality who happens to be our alumni and a son of my teacher also. So welcome, sir. Today, the topic given is the role of teachers in students' development. As the topic is very crucial in the field of education, students need joyful education and nation needs joyful teachers. If we are not joyful, we are not going to inspire anybody to be joyful. Actually, this FDP or the conferences and the webinars we have been conducting are just an efforts to put adults like us to school so that we can create an environment where students would like to come and enjoy learning process. To cover this important topic, we have amidst us Dr. Ravichandra T. He is currently working as a Deputy General Manager, Human Resources at 3M India Limited, based at Bangalore. Previously, he has worked at PepsiCo and Every Denizen at corporate profile level. He has completed his BE in Mechanical Engineering from VTU Belgaum, MBA in Human Resources from University of Mysore, PGDHRM from University of Mysore, and recently completed his PhD in Business Management from Shivaji University, Kolhapur, under the guidance of Dr. C.S. Dalvi. Sir, it's a real privilege. I'm sure the participants will be benefited with this eminent person's talk. I officially welcome you, sir. Dr. Ravichandra, sir, over to you.
Thank you, ma'am. So before I start, I just wanted to confirm if you're able to see my screen. Can one of you confirm if you're able to see my screen and hear
Yes,
me?
sir, it is. Yes, yes. We can see your screen, sir. It is
Thank you.
visible.
Thank you so much for the confirmation. Good afternoon, all. As ma'am was introducing me, my name is Ravi Chandra. I'm based out of Bangalore. I currently work with 3M as a DGM HR. Based out of Bangalore, I'm responsible for Pan India HR operations. It's been a great privilege, since I've been given this topic of delivering a lecture on a role of teachers in the student development. So before we kickstart, I know that post lunch sessions are always not good for both the the faculty members as well as to the participants, and until unless you don't make it too extensive and too interactive. So I would request all of you please to make it more interactive. There are a couple of questions which may I throw to you. Request you all to answer and make it more participative. Yeah. So the topic given to me is role of teacher in student development. And all of us are aware, we have been brought up from our childhood days into these topics quite often, and today we are all on the other side of the river as a faculty here. So something which I will cover over a period of next 90 minutes is I've broken down into three pieces. The first piece is that I will talk about the role of a teacher and what has changed in the modern times. We will also talk about a couple of issues concerning the students and a couple of issues concerning the faculty, and then move on to the very interesting subject called as a student development. How we as a faculty members would thrive to make the development of students more meaningful in their lives. So I'm on slide number 1. I think traditionally we have been hearing many words, buzzwords like teacher, we call them as a lecturer. So what does it mean? So a teacher was always seen as a lecturer, or you may call it as a professor, or somebody who delivered a knowledge, and they also conducted a lot of test. Now test was a mode through which they were doing more of an evaluation. Now a teacher was perceived as someone who had answers to every possible questions. Perhaps he or she was also deemed to be a gatekeeper of all resource and information available. This was very, very valid, and it was more meaningful till a decade back. But however, the things have changed. Now the teachers are no more responsible for delivering only information today. But all those things have changed in the advent of the internet or the digital media. Now information is easily accessible. A click of a button, there is an ocean of data. It's just a keystrokes away. The question is now, given that the information is easily accessible to the students, now what is precisely the role of a teacher? Now it's no longer a source of information or gatekeeper for an information. So it's beyond that. However, it goes without saying that the teachers play a very important role in students' life. As a teacher, one must bring out the best in students and inspire them to strive the greatness and work for their development. Now, all of us know that the education has changed a lot in the recent times. It has become more interactive now with the intrusion of digital media. We all know the new age technology like artificial intelligence. I think if I tell you a couple of things, you will be able to relate it better. Things like Alexa, Hey Google, Siri, you just click it and ask a question, it'll be in a position to answer you better. So this is a new age technology. We also have augmented reality. We have things like simulators, we have things like the 360-degree walk. And you will be surprised, if we look back, at least 2 decades back, the augmented reality never existed. That means potentially if you had to open a machine and see what's there inside, you had to literally cut it and do a cross section and see what is inside a machinery to do a diagnosis. But today that can be done through a simulator. You have a lot of softwares, where you can give your commands and you can go see, touch, and feel those things now. So that has become more relevant in today's context. It is not only applicable in science, it is there in medical field, it's there in education as well. And you'll be surprised, today there are a lot of, industries or institutions, I may call it as, that can give you a 360-degree walk. That means sitting in somewhere in India, if you want to see the streets of London, there are a lot of softwares where that will give you a virtual walk into the city itself. So those are the things which have changed, and it has opened up a new dimension, not only in the other industry, but even in education as well. Now, what are the teachers expected to do? I mean, they are expected to help students, of course, to understand the knowledge, and something which is something which is available to them is information today, but the role of a teacher goes beyond that now. So it's beyond textbooks. More the teachers interact with the students with viable, the real life examples, incidents, students will have a better understanding, and they'll also be more aware of the subject. With the real life examples, they can apply their lessons to many subjects. The teacher has to be quite consistent guide here to help the students in graduating from one lesson to the other. What you can see, the pictures of couple of companies here, those are very, very relevant today. Students quite often use all of those. There is an information available on ebooks, through Amazon Kindle. Google has been a very common platform for all of us. There are a lot of information which are shared through WhatsApp. Wikipedia has been a source. It's been a kind of an encyclopedia for many of us. And today, even Facebook has also evolved. A lot of information is flowed through Facebook. So the bottom line of this slide is, while the role of teacher is quite important, now it's no more a source of information. It's no more a source of delivering information. So the role of teacher has changed multifold in the last 10 to 15 years time. So they are working, the teachers have to work, faculty have to work beyond what is mentioned in the textbook. So with that, I will next move on to the challenges what students face in the current context. I have broken it down into 5. The first thing is we call it as a mental health. My apologies for the spelling there. It's mental health, or it's also called as a mental well-being. The second challenge which students quite commonly face today is on technology. The third piece is around the career, what career they have to choose and how to go, where to navigate. The fourth challenges which students face today is more to do with the demographics. The fifth one, which is very, very relevant today, is the social validation. So I'll cover one by one in detail, and maybe I'll take a pause in between, to check if the participants are understanding it. If they do have any questions, please feel free to raise your hands or feel free to unmute yourself and ask questions, please. The first piece which we will cover is on mental health. What is mental health or mental well-being? Mental health or well-being includes our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. It affects how we think, feel, and act. It also helps determine how we handle issues, stress related to others, and make choices or decisions in our life. So mental health is an important walk in everybody's life. It can be in a childhood, it can be in adolescence, it can be through the entire stages of adulthood. Before I move on, I think this has been more of a buzzword today. We have all been hearing about it. So if we are talking about an imbalance in mental well-being, what do we think that are the potential or the possible reasons for our well-being? So I would request participants to unmute and share their inputs on this. I hope I am audible.
So can you repeat the question, sir?
The question here is that we have been hearing about the mental health or the mental well-being in the current context. Most of us have been hearing about it. So when we say about mental well-being or mental imbalance in the mental health, what were the potential reasons why there will be an imbalance?
What I feel is that students are, especially in this COVID scenario, I'm teaching PG students, that is MBA students. They are having a mental agony or anxiety in terms of what is going to be their future, especially people who are coming from the rural background.
Right.
they have a very bleak lookout towards their future.
Understand. Completely
That
agree.
is adding to their mental boost. Plus, the financial situations at home also is taking a toll on them.
That's right, sir. I can't agree more than this. Yes, that's right. Couple of factors, I completely agree that's COVID situation, people do not have a line of sight about their careers, the family background as well. These are some of the common concerns we have, that puts the mental well-being quite imbalanced among many of us. The other reasons are also more to do with the biological reasons. It can be something to do with the genes, or it can be because of a brain chemistry. The major reason would be because of the life experiences such as trauma or any kind of an abuse. What sir just mentioned is part of the life experiences. Today, I being in the corporate world, I also hear this is not a common concern from a student, but it is also a common concern from an employee. You see the business has not been great. The revival of business has been a challenge. So people do not have a line of sight as to how long the business will continue. That is putting an uncertainty, among the lives of both the students as well as in the corporates as well. So this is causing a mental imbalance, or the mental well-being is being disturbed. The other third reason would be there is a family history of mental health that can also be a concern among many of the students. Now, it's very important, as a faculty, for us to diagnose this and understand that what a children or a student is going through. If he is mentally, his mental well-being is been quite imbalanced, it's too important, for a faculty to diagnose that. So, what are the some of the early signs of a mental health? It can be pulling away from people and not being part of any kind of an activity, having very low energy or no energy at all, and some students feel quite numb, or they act as if nothing matters to them. Many of them experience being helpless or hopeless. Some get into a habit of smoking, drinking. This is quite common nowadays. Feeling unusually confused, forgetful, angry, upset, worried, or they get scared. They quite often fight with family and friends, experience a very severe mood swings, that cause problems in their personal life and also a relationship with others. Thinking of harming self or others, that's where we normally quite often hear that a student has attempted to a suicide. So this has become a quite a common problem now. Inability to perform daily tasks, like coming to school and working on the assignments given to them. Now, on the right hand side, if you see the data, this is a published data from National Alliance of Mental Illness. It typically says that 50% of the students rate their mental health below average or poor. That's an alarming. And this data is published with a report of analysis done both in Asia as well as in Europe zone. So 7% of the parents reported that their college students are experiencing mental health issues. So it's not only students, but the parents are also now acknowledging, saying that they are going through this mental health issue. 1 in 4 students now have reported having a thought of suicidal, which is not a good thing. 1 in 7 students reported engaged in abnormal, reckless behavior. So this has become a quite a common problem across the student's life. Now, what are the ways we need to maintain a positive mental health? A couple of them, which are suggested as per the data, is a we need to route them to a professional help whenever it is required. We have something called as an assistance programs, which are very common today. You will have a professional or a subject matter expert in counseling, talking to a person, understanding, do a little bit of a deep dive into the problem, suggest what are the actions to be done. So this is something which is done by the professional agencies. Of course, the faculty also needs to play a hat of a counselor at times whenever it is required. Now, the second piece which all of us have to do as a parent, as a faculty, is connect them with others. If they are feeling that they are isolated, they are feeling that they're kind of away from the other population, it's important to help them connecting with the right mix of people, so that they socialize, they understand, they talk, and their mental well-being becomes a little positive when they connect with people. The third thing is, it's very important to repose a greater positivity. Mental well-being can always impact you very, very negatively when there's too much of negativity. So what's more important as a parent, as a faculty, is to make sure that we repose a greater positivity in them. Talk to them and tell them what are the positives, not cover anything which is bringing them down. The fourth piece, which is quite important, is involve them in physical activities. The last thing is there are a lot of coping skills, and that's where the faculty has to play a hat and make sure that whenever you see a child being mentally well-being, it's important that now we come out with a coping skills. The second challenge which students are currently going through is on technology. We all know that the advancement of technology is good, but it has completely changed the way we are looking at learning today. We have actually moved from a classroom to places like e-learning, virtual learning. We have replaced the pen and paper working completely with calculators, computers, and to online assignments. Now, in the current COVID situation, we all know what has happened in the last 9 months. Most of the schools, colleges are all doing virtually. Now, e-learning has become a new normal now. Many of us, around a year back, had we had somebody checked with us saying that, now how is e-learning, we wouldn't have promoted that because we didn't have an experience in that. Now, given that situation, people have greatly switched on to the new technology now. However, even entirely the new approaches like e-learning don't offer the same social benefits of a regular school or a college. Now, without a classroom where students can actually form friendships, relationship with their peers, they may not learn the same social cues as a regular student. Without any real face time, it sometimes makes even the classrooms or the classes less serious and less meaningful. Now, we all know that technology is good, but it's also bad for some reasons. If you remember, there were also some discrepancies as to how much the technology should be used in students' life. There were times when schools were all debating, colleges were all debating that should we or should we not allow the calculators in the classroom. Now, essentially, it was allowed, and because of that, now the students who were struggling with maths were able to solve the problems much easier now. So while it has become advantage to a certain extent, it has also created a disadvantage. And also, what we need to understand is every time a technology is introduced in students' life, I think it goes through a gestation period. There's a bit of a struggle when a kids, struggle to understand the new technology. If you look at today's context, I think even the students who are in class 1, class 2, grade 1, grade 2, they also do a lot of online assessments today. They also take up a lot of online assessments. So that's causing a bit of a stress among the students today. The third one, which I would like to talk about, is on career. Now, in today's context, we all know that we have a plethora of offerings in the field of education. So students face a problem, something which is termed as a problem of plenty while choosing a career. So I remember that when I was doing my engineering, at least 2 decades back, there were only 3 or 4 streams, in engineering. Now, trust me, today we have close to about 55 streams in engineering. More than, if in fact, it's actually more than 55 streams in engineering. So it's quite common that a student will be lost, when while choosing a career. So there are so many options available, and for an inexperienced student, that becomes really difficult to steer their career in the right direction. So quite often they lean to parents, they lean to faculty for making their choices in the career. So that's where the faculty has to, play a pivotal role as such. Now, the fourth challenge we all see is on demographics. The challenge will be more towards a mix of students from different ethnic group, different gender, a different socio-economic status, a different culture as such. So these are the challenges which the current students are all grappling. We all know that many of parents are now in a transferable job. They keep shuttling between cities, between different geographies. When they move and their children also move, the moment they move, they from a north to west to east to south, whatever different directions they move around. Every time they come to a different schools, there is a change in the culture. So that's becoming a challenging factor. So now it all rests on how comfort the faculty can give to them. So this is a fourth challenge which I would like to talk about. The last piece is on social validation. Now, what is social validation? So when we are very uncertain about what to do, how to do, it's a general tendency, it's a human tendency that we will look up to a person or or somebody who is an expert to guide us. And we do this automatically and in a very unconscious way we do that. That means, if I struggle in taking up a career, I normally lean towards a friend, who can give me a suggestion. I hope we all remember that when we used to visit our single screen theaters, many years back, we would have purchased the tickets, the movie tickets, but despite of that, we would have reached out to few people from the previous show just to check on their reviews, about their perspectives, that is a movie good or not. But did it change our decisions because we have already purchased a ticket? Yes, in few cases, yes, people used to return back the tickets and go. What was the damage which was caused to us? When somebody says that the movie is not good, we used to go and sit in a theater with a mindset thinking that the movie is not good. But what we fail to realize is that movie may not be good from the point of view of the other person who has watched it. Maybe he was not happy with the action scenes over there. He was looking out for a family scene there. We never know. But yes, that's a social validation today all of us are struggling through. We all know that consciously, unconsciously, we all go through this Facebook platform where we expect a social validation. We it quite often it so happens that if you don't get the number of likes or comments, or if it is on a lower side, people get into depression. So that's a social validation, and today's children are all going through this problem. So I'll take a pause here if anyone has questions around this. Okay, I'll move on. So now it's quite important that yes, there are certain challenges which students go through, and with the advancement of technology today, now the role of teacher has become much more complex. Now, there are four broad things which I've called out here. The first being the teacher has to be a role model. He needs to play the hat of a counselor. It can be pertaining to a general counseling or it can be pertaining to a career counseling. The third hat which a teacher has to play is mentoring. The fourth thing is act as a development agent, have the genuinity of developing a student. Now, having said this, we all go through a phase where you will not have the homogeneity in a classroom. That means you will have students who are bright, who are from a different ethnic group, different gender, different intellectual levels, different EQ, IQ. You will find a mix of population. Now, with that, what's more important is how do you role model? Now, we all know that maybe when we look back into our own lives, we will still remember a maths teacher who had helped us to probably conquer a fractions or conquer a table. We all know a great English teacher who helped us out in commenting on our stories. And the social teacher helping out with this Battle of Panipat probably. So we all know it's about the persona of a faculty member, and why does it still stay in our mind even after so many years? That's majorly because they were actually a role model. They were quite benevolent, they were quite uniform in terms of their treating children's or kids over there. The second role which a teacher has to play, which is very, very relevant in today's context, is on counseling. As I said, it can be a general counseling. It can be also because it can also be a career counseling. Now, general counseling is quite applicable till you come to a certain stage of graduation. But the career counseling is something which is very important when you just a step before you get into a graduation, and probably a step just before you get into the corporate world or into a working profession. So that's where the faculty plays the hat of a career counselor. Now, we all have to acknowledge that due to the lack of career counseling, we are finding a lot of poor performance across the education sectors in India. It is certainly not due to the scarcity of skill or talent. If I look back at the reasons, it is deep rooted, and it goes straight into the lack of experience, a lack of vision, and lack of smartness in choosing a career. Now, these are the common mistakes which students all make. Now, the teachers can certainly save them by ensuring that they don't make a wrong decision. How do we do it? We have to show a care, nurture students, pay extra attention, at times, be their best pals, show confidence to build and, they build the relationship, and ensure that, we extract the best out of them. So at times I've seen even the faculty members, sitting for long hours with students and telling them about their personal experience, saying that, how did they not do well in their education, what kind of mistake they did, while choosing a career, give that as an example to the current generation kids, and also tell them what is good, what is there for them in the new career. So those are some of the things which a faculty members has to do. And of course, a teacher must also enhance progress while giving people the right tools and helping them to make an informed decision. They also need to help students with problem solving skills. They are also there to create a bunch of students who are very, very creative, independent, maybe informed, incisive, and innovative. The third piece I would like to cover is on mentoring. Of course, mentoring is something which is required even in the early stages of a student life. The role of a teacher is to make sure that you do a proper hand holding in terms of telling them what is right, what is wrong. So this is something which I see should be followed by all the faculty members right from the start. The last thing which we will talk about in greater detail in our subsequent slides is being a development agent. Ensure that not only tell them what is right and wrong, but also develop them so that we make their lives more meaningful. Now, before we move into development, there are certain characteristics of millennial students. Sorry, just before that, I want to take a pause and check if anybody has questions around this. Okay, so we'll move on. Now, we quite often hear this word called as millennials, and we hear this quite often. It's become more like a buzzword today. Now, what are millennials? Millennials, in the definition, is people who were born after 1982. Now, with that definition, most of the students in the college today are all millennials. Now, there was an interesting study done by Ho and Strauss way back in 2000, and they have done this extensive research among different age groups of the college going and the higher secondary students across various geographies. They took close to about 2 years to make this study, and very interestingly, they have come out with the 7 characteristics of millennial students. So if you look at the range of the age group of students who were part of the study, were typically people from the age group of 17 till 23, 24, people who have even in the postgraduate courses as well. So these are a couple of the traits, which Howe and Strauss had identified. Now, the first characteristics is special, which means many have actually come from smaller families. There are students who have come from a smaller family who have either only few siblings or no siblings in few cases. So they have nobody to compete with. Because they are a single kid in the family, they have always received a greater attention, and they've also received an increased security from their parents. So the parents in this context are actually called as the helicopter parents. That's only primarily because the parents keep constantly hovering around their children's or kids to find out what they are doing, what they would need. So these are the special category millennials we have today. Second category we have is sheltered. So more than the previous generation children's, parents have kept them very, very closer to home with an increased focus on safety and connection to the family. That typically means that you can see the parents, they normally make houses around the school itself so that the kids don't travel. That's more from a security standpoint. The parents are all okay to travel to a different geography in that particular city, but they don't want their kids to do it. That's more of a concern, and they always wanted to keep the children in a very closer to the family, but also involved in a very organized activities. If you look at today, the children normally get into a musical class and into a sports class, into a badminton classes. So the parents are getting them more organized today. The third characteristics of millennial students are they are quite confident. There has been an increased parental involvement, coaching, adult environment gave them lots of support and self-confidence. That means they have been exposed to everything by their own parents. So this has boosted their confidence, and they have a greater faith in the way they can develop themselves. The fourth category is team oriented. Now, these are the kids who have grew up among the most diverse population and learn to be more civil, and they are no more less me oriented. That means they don't no more say that I am the only person, I am the greatest. So that has gone. When we compare that with the previous generation, now they know how to mingle. They know how to play nice and share. So this is the fourth category of the millennial students which we see. The fifth one is conventional. Now they are more resourceful, dynamic, environmentally quite conscious than the previous generation. That means they are more organized by themselves. They don't need any teaching or instruction from their parents. Now the sixth category we see is pressurized. They are quite over scheduled. They are over mentored and driven to success among peers, in part due to increased pressure to attend college or in order to succeed in life. And I mean, a majority of the population are now getting categorized into this pressured millennials because they want to outperform. They overcommit themselves, they overcommit to their parents. So this is adding too much of pressure on their life. Now, the last category is high achieving. Now, these are the set of students who are very, very futuristic. They are very future oriented. They are great at planning. They focus on long-term success. So their way of preparation will be entirely different. So these are the students which we have to deal in our life, being a faculty. Now, before we get into the next subject, let us understand about the key definitions. We quite often use this in this particular session. One, change. Change is nothing but any condition that is altered from a previous condition. So not necessarily that it has to be positive. It can be either negative, it can be positive, it can be healthy, unhealthy. So change typically means that you are moving from one condition to another condition. Now, the second definition we have to understand is what is growth. Now, adding of something to a pre-existing status is called as a growth. So expansion of personality trait is one of an example for a growth. Now, the third definition is development. Now, we all know that development is a continuous process. The integration of subsystems into the whole without losing separate identities. That typically means that there is an element of identity which stays, and we are going to work around that. So, but however, development has always been positive and it has always been healthy. I want to take a pause if just want to check if there are any questions. I'm not sure, I'm unable to see the chat, but
Uh, yes, sir. I'm Dr. Kishore Kumar from Kolhapur, C Cyber.
mhm.
Hello.
Yes,
Yeah.
sir. Go ahead.
So I would like to know from you is like now, what is making at at a postgraduate level the students group or whoever are there,
Mhm.
yeah, why they were so much of suffering with mental issues. Basically, it has to be at the at a school level because they are not much exposed to the real time world. But as you are moving ahead, your mental health issues are also growing. But being a mature person, you must be able to manage.
Mhm.
So, like, how, why so? Like, I would like to know from you.
Sure.
I have questions
Yes, sir.
clear to
Yes,
you.
yes, Dr.
Yeah,
Ravi.
yeah.
So, a simple answer to it, yes, the mental well-being, people experience that it is across various stages of their life. As I told you, it can be in adolescent age, it can be in adulthood as well. The reason why many people who are in post-graduation experience the pressure or having an imbalance in the mental well-being is only because they have to get into the corporate world and crack a job. So that pressure
Mhm.
stays on. And if you look at typically even at a graduation level, there is also a study which says that people who do not want to pursue their post-graduation and who are very,
Mhm.
very clear that no, they want to continue with their job in graduation, the similar pressure they also
Mhm.
experience once they get into the year number 3 or year number 4, depends on what kind of course they are picking up. So a simple answer to it is yes, it is always because they have to get a job and they want to crack a campus recruitment or an interview to get into a job. So that pressure stays. Yes, that's the reason why most of the education institutions now have the counselors who are specialized in giving them a career counseling.
Or is it like a over perceived thing? Like mental issues at such a level, are we giving it much importance where the person has to learn how to manage with that one?
Okay, so there is also, if you look at the couple of, I'll talk about it in my later slides as well. Now, if you look at
Mhm.
people who are in either in a post graduation or a graduation who are very certain to get into a job after their education.
Mhm.
Now,
Mhm.
one, when they're in the year number 3 or year number 2 in post graduation, they always have a pressure to get a job. So that's kind of putting pressure on them. Second, once they get a job as well, through a campus placement, now the pressure also mounts because they have to perform in the new job. And today, the worlds have been quite competitive. The corporate worlds have been very, very competitive. That they would have already experienced, because of their summer interns or winter internship program. They would have seen the corporate world. So there is always a bit of an anxiety among students, in either in post graduation or in graduation. That's
Mhm.
primarily because A, of getting a job, and second, they also have that anxiety phase because they have to perform in that new job, whatever they have cracked. So yes, at times, it is overplaying. It's a little overplaying on their mind. That's where the counselor has to, calm them down and tell them what is the right thing for us to do. But this is something which is quite common across many of the institutions today, Dr. Ravi.
Mhm. Yeah. Oh, thank you. Thank you, sir.
Sure. Just wanted to check if there are more questions. Okay, if there are no questions, I'll move on to the next part of it. Now we'll be talking about the student development theory. Now we all know what development is to build on a specific identity to work around that. Now as a faculty, now how do we diagnose that, and what are the theories around it is what we will be studying here. Now, now we all know that for our understanding why sometimes, just similar to what Dr. Ravi was checking here, now there are a lot of students, who succeed. There are also, few who fail. There are some students who handle the conflict better. There are some students, who get into fight. So we need to understand why this is happening, and to precisely to help the diagnosis piece, the student development theory is more important and relevant for us. Now, it is more than happenstance that some students come to college and never experience a moment of difficulty fitting in. They go easily in the college. They finish off their education, get into a job. But a majority of the population, they all struggle. They struggle to find their place in the college. Now, student development theory looks at how a student will grow and develop during the years they are spending in the college. Now, precisely, there are three concepts which I have brought forward. The first one is psychosocial. Now, what it essentially means is this is a theory where an individual wants to establish his identity, how he or she will establish an identity. Now, the second one is cognitive structural theory. This typically explains how individuals understand their experience. The last piece is on the moral development theory. This is about how does a student's ability to reason will affect the way they behave. So on the right hand side, the chart, what you can see is the stages through which all these students will go through. And this is more relevant not only for people who are in the college, but this is relevant even for the the higher education students as well. I'll talk about in greater detail about the psychosocial theory. Now, this is a theory which was developed by Arthur Chickering and Linda. This is actually called as a theory of identity development. Now, psychosocial theory looks at identity. It explores how students define themselves, what they want to do with their lives, and what kind of relationship they want to build with others. Now, Chickering and Linda had suggested that every student will typically go through 7 vectors of development or 7 stages of development. These are the stages through which they move during their college years. So it's more relevant for people who are either in graduation or post-graduation. Now, the 7 stages are like this. The first stage is that the student will understand how to develop a competence in this model. Okay, so the second one is on managing emotions. So first part I'll cover on developing competence. So this is about when they get into their post graduation or the graduation, they'll understand about their vision of life. They will understand that, okay, what am I supposed to do? Basis on that, they will have a clear plan as to what are the competencies they need to develop. But of course, it is not possible without a guidance of a faculty. That's one. Second, managing emotions. Now there will be more emotional. You normally see this during the last year of any college as such. People will be quite emotional, so they will understand what is life and they know how to better manage the emotions now. Now, if you look at both graduation as well as post graduation also, you will realize the third piece, which is moving through autonomy towards an interdependence, is more relevant. There you see that, okay, I can't work independently. I need to work in a team. I need to be dependent on somebody. No, they will always get this exposure, when they have been exposed to things like, a seminar or maybe a workshop or maybe, any kind of a summit where they have to present in a group. That's where they quickly realize that the interdependence is something which they have to develop. They also understand that they have to develop a very mature interpersonal relationship. No more fights, but they get socially gathered together, share information, share relationship. So that's what we have been talking about. This particular phase is something, as per Arthur Chickering and Linda, they say that it typically happens in the first 2 years of the graduation. Okay, or maybe first 3 years of the graduation. They'll develop this. The fifth piece is establishing identity. I think that's where the major struggle will be. You will see that a student always wants to outperform, be a number one in the class, be more respectable. So that's an identity which every kid wants to establish today. The sixth piece is developing purpose. Now, as they move towards some part of their education, they understand that, okay, why I'm studying, what is the purpose, and what I should become. So that's a greater understanding they'll have. The last piece is developing an identity. Okay, now they have established, now they want to develop it, which typically means that, okay, I've been branded as a good student, but how can I develop it further? How can I become more better than what I used to be? So that's where a student will be working on. That means he would like to improvise on his identity, already established identity as such. So it also says that basically the students move through the first 4 vectors during their 3 years in the college, and the last 3 during their last 1 or 2 years of their college. So there is always a fluidity to the movement. However, we all need to understand that students may move faster or slower completely, which is dependent on their individual or personality as such. The second the development theory which I would like to cover is on cognitive structural theory. Now, the cognitive structural theory considers how students understand their experience. There are many values such as learning, teaching, and change that are core to the cognitive structural theory. So I'll explain you in detail. Before that, this theory was developed by William Perry. It's called a scheme of intellectual and ethical development. Now, Perry considered how students considered and organized information. Now, Perry's system offers a window of understanding about first year students' approach to information. First year students often find it difficult when they are presented with a world that is other than black and white to them. Now, Perry shows how helping the students move from one stage to the last stage, how it helps their learning process is what we will be talking about. So the first stage, which he explains, is dualism. Now, in this stage, typically the world is black and white, for the students. And the students always think that the teachers have all the answers. Students have a difficult time analyzing or reflecting. In their minds, school or college is all about giving back what teachers told you. So the facts here are they only know what is right or wrong, which has been told to them by the teacher or the faculty. But what they do not know is they can't use their own intelligence in doing a judgment. That's the stage of dualism. Now, the second stage is multiplicity. Now, we are seeing students who feel that peers have legitimate knowledge. They are beginning to recognize that there are multiple shades of gray, and it's quite normal for teachers and parents also to make mistake. So they have moved from the first stage where they apply their intelligence. Now they understand that, okay, there are friends who can help them. Now here they acknowledge that okay, even parents can also make mistakes and faculty can also make mistakes. So they come to that acceptance stage. The third stage is relativism. Now, students are aware that there is no need to support opinions. We see higher level of critical thinking, such as synthesis and evaluation here. Students find that they are able to empathize. Okay, so they are in this particular stage, what they will do is they will try to form their own opinions here. That means they will be able to do an absolute or relative comparison, and they draw the inference out of that. So it completely depends on how they infer about the particular situation. So that's relativism. So this is a common phase where people make too much of judgments on their own, but some backed with data, some may not be backed with data at all. It's purely based on their perception. The last part is the fourth stage, as per the theory, is commitment, where students develop a set of values and they can make choices in the contextual world. Learning takes on importance. Okay, here is where most of us, most of these children, who are in the post-graduation final year, they fall into. Now they realize that no, they have to make choices and they have to commit to a solution. And here is where maximum learning happens. So this is a phase which, according to William Perry, says that this is something which happens typically in the last year of education. So when I say education, it can be dependent, whether if a student wants to pursue or not, it depends completely on him. But if he doesn't want to continue, typically this is what you will see in graduation. Or if somebody has moved on to a post-graduation, this is what you will see in the last year of post-graduation. So I'll take a pause for any possible questions. Okay. If there are no questions, I'll move on to the next theory. It's called as a moral development theory, and this was developed by Kohlberg, and it's actually called as a Kohlberg stages of moral reasoning. So moral Kohlberg has identified as 6 stages, but has categorized them into 3 different particular, broken down into 3 different levels as such. Now, Kohlberg describes 6 stages of moral development where students develop a sense of personal responsibility for their action. So now in the previous stage, we have all understood that a person makes a commitment, he'll make his own choice, he'll own his decision. But in this particular phase, this is more of a development where, a person will have responsibility for the action and ultimately for a morally justified society. Now, in order to move from one stage to another stage, the students must also go through a moral conflict. So considering that, the Kohlberg has broken down the 6 stages into 3 levels. So I'll talk about it. The first level is pre-conventional morality. Now, in this particular stage, there is a wish to avoid punishment. There is usually a limited interest in others unless it benefits the child. Okay. So stage 1, if you look at the right hand side chart, you can see that stage 1, it's more to do with avoid punishment. Now here the child or individual is good in order to avoid being punished. Okay. Now if a person has been punished, they must have done something wrong. That's their perception now. Now they have come to an acceptance, where they're morally responsible. They say that, okay, fine, I try to avoid it, but if I'm punished, that means I've done something wrong. Now that's a stage number 1. Stage number 2, at this stage, child recognizes that there is not just one right view that is handed down by the authority. There are different individuals who have different perspectives or viewpoints. That means their aim is at getting a reward. So that's a stage number 2. Now we'll move on to the second level, which is called as conventional morality. Now this is a move from egocentricity to need to conform, or in other words, we describe it as being too little good. Now here is where people understand that people still fail to understand that there are shades of gray. That means they still believe that there is nothing beyond that. Now in the stage 3 or the level 2 of conventional morality, now the child or individual is good in order to be seen as being a good person by others. Therefore, they need approval. So this is under stage 3, which means they they accept the reality, but they want to be a good boy or a girl. They want to show the highest level of a good attitude. So this is what they strive for. Now, the loyalty to law and order, which is a stage number 4. Here, the child or an individual becomes aware of the wider rules of the society. So he'll also become judgmental about obeying the rules in order to uphold the law, and nobody wants to be found guilty. So this is something which the students will thrive for. So this is under the conventional level. Now the last level is post-conventional reasoning. This is where we see ethics in full bloom, which means integrity is also the front and the center of the decision. People are able to apply their ethical position to set a problem. Now, if you look at the stage number 5, so the child or individual becomes aware that while rules, laws might exist for a good or a greater number, there are at times when they will work against the interest of particular level, laws or individuals. So this is where you will see that a person has now understood about the law, but he or she will actually take a stand in terms of standing against a cause because they feel that it's wrong. This is how you see typically a strikes happening in a college, or they may do an agitation in the college. So this is primarily because people are in the stage number 5. Okay. Now stage number 6, which is universal principles of ethics. Now, people at this stage have developed their own set of moral guidelines, which may or may not fit the law. The principle apply to everyone. So we have heard quite commonly, we hear even from students also saying that, look, it's my rule, this is the way I have decided. That typically means that people or students are in this stage number 6. So example, you will see human rights, justice, they talk about equality. The person will be prepared to act to defend these principles, even it means going against the rest of the society. Okay. So these are the 3 student development theories I had. I'll take a pause for any possible questions. Okay. If not, I'll move on. Since we talked about these 3 development theories, which are very relevant and useful, we also need to understand what are the potential sources of development. The first point which I would like to talk about is on giving a clarity and consistency of objective and purpose. This is where the faculty have to play a major role. A lot depends on the institutional size. Third thing is that there are a lot of curriculums, teaching and evaluation which has to change. Now, if you look at the landscape of industries in India, or the landscape of the corporations in India, you could see a lot of corporations have been partnering with a lot of academic institutes, to build a course so that it will help them in future. Example, I can take an example of a company like Flextronics. Flextronics is a major company which typically manufactures the phones for Apple. So they are they are into a conglomerate business, but they majorly do a business with Apple directly. Now, Feston is last 15 years back, they had come out with a program where they said we will be working with institutions or academic institutions for that matter to build a curriculum, which will help them as a student and which will help them as an organization. So it will be a win-win situation. So this curriculum was actually introduced in the last year of engineering, and that's how the changes were made. So what is the positivity of this? The students will also have a first-hand experience, before they get into a corporate world. At least they'll have their basics strong, before they get into a corporate world. That's how the curriculums are now getting built. Now, and this is also helpful in developing a student because he or she will not struggle after they get into a corporate world, because they know what's expected. There are certain leadership traits which have been built through the development program. a lot of technical knowledge, which has been imparted. So this is something which is very relevant. Second, teaching and evaluation. The way the teaching pedagogy is today has to change. I'm sure that a couple of the other faculty or the resource members have already covered that in the previous sessions. So I will not talk much about it. And the third is the way we evaluate it. Okay. The fourth source of potential development is residence program as arrangement. That typically means that if there is a residential program, the way we look at developmental activities has to change. And the last one is friends, group, students, culture are some of the potential areas of development for students. With that, I also want to call out, some of the noteworthy ongoing development activities across various institutions in India. I mean, I have just listed down a few of them, but I'm sure that there can be a big list to it. There are a lot of activities which are going on in institutes, like there are the student academic clubs. There is a management club, there is a physical science club. There is a cultural club. There are boot camps. There are a lot of workshops, projects, seminars. There are summer internship, winter internship. There are a lot of leadership development program, youth leadership summit. The placement cell is also an opportunity. Industrial tour, both sides it's an opportunity. There are a lot of laboratories. There are inter-college talent shows. There are international, national, state Olympiad. Lastly, I think in my list, I've put it down as a lot of students are now getting exposed to the rural community services. So these are some of the developmental opportunities which do exist in India, which many of the institutions like yours are also following. Now, with that, I end my session. I'm happy to take questions if you have any.
Yeah, if you all have any questions, please go ahead.
Yes, for me it is very clear question for today. This is Dr. Kishore. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
But okay, nothing. Thank you.
Yeah, participants, anybody?
I think participants are under stress. What to be asked?
Why? They are free to discuss. Here we have come to learn and gain knowledge only. So nothing like that. Please go ahead, participants.
All eyes on the chat. I am okay to take questions even on chat box also.
Yeah. Please feel free.
It's a post-lunch pressure.
Nothing. So there's one question, Dr. Ravi sir.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is one question from Fernandez Joseph John. No, sorry.
Yeah. So how can we
Just
we
one
as
second.
a faculty?
Yeah. How can we as a faculty inculcate students to have interest in rural community services if coming from urban areas? Are you there, Fernandez sir? Fernandez Joseph sir? Yeah, sir, Ravichandra sir, if you can answer. Yeah, he's there.
Yeah.
He's there. Yeah, please.
Thanks, sir. Thanks, and very interesting question, I must say. One, the rural community services can't be an optional in any of the curriculums. That's my view, because the moment you make it an optional one, as you rightly said, there are many people who are coming from the urban areas may not be interested. So it's important that we develop a curriculum, which is which also includes or probably covers up even the rural community service as well. And I have personally seen a lot of institutions, be it corporate or be it in educational institutions. I've also personally seen that they also have tie up with the rural community agencies. Like the lot of there is a United Way, there is Samarthanam, there are a lot of NGOs, where the institutions are tied up with. So if they don't want to make it a part of the curriculum, it is always given as an option to volunteer. But it's actually a very nice experience to have the rural community experience.
Yeah, any questions, please feel free to ask. Nothing to this end. Please don't hesitate. You can ask, really ask. We have enough time.
As Dr. Ravi was saying, it's very true that it's post-lunch pressure.
Yes, sir.
What I can also do is I can share the notes around the session which I had today. I know it's a little bit of cluttered, I will clean it up and put it in a PDF format and share it with ma'am so that she can pass it on to all the participants.
Hello, good afternoon, sir.
Yes, ma'am.
Hello, good afternoon, sir. Sir, this is just what my observation is when you were discussing about the mental health, like the pressure which the students are undergoing regarding this mental health technology because of career as well as the demographics and social validation. So
Mhm.
just this is what my perspective is and my understanding. So regarding the demographics, like when the students are moving from one place to another, or when they are learning into a multicultural environment, so don't you think somehow it is also going to help them out in understanding various behavioral pattern of other students as well, like mixing in the group or getting a kind of a background where they can work within a team in when they are going in a corporate field? Because I just shared my dad was in Navy, so we had to move around after every 2 years. So it was like it was a bit challenging. It was arduous also when like the first few weeks of going to school. But after a point of time, it used to be a new experience for me, because sometimes it was in Vishakhapatnam, sometimes it was in Cochin, sometimes it was in Valsura, like Gujarat. So but don't you think it is going to add value also? It is going to enrich the students as well? Thank you so much, sir.
Completely.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Nazi. I completely agree with your comments. Yes, to a certain extent, while it is a challenge, it is also benefiting the students to a larger extent. Let me give you my perspective, Dr. Nazia. Since I work in the corporate,
Yes, sir.
typically,
Yes.
yeah,
Please.
typically what happens is, there is always a policy which organization make, to give an accelerated career to the employees. They normally say that, since we all work in the large corporations today, the role exists in different geographies of India, or at times, it can also be outside an international assignment as well. So
Yes.
typically, the corporations have now come out with a policy that every time, an employee completes around maybe 15 months or 18 months, he or she becomes eligible for a movement. Now, with such a short time span, 18 months or 24 months, if a kids keep moving around, at times, it finds very, very difficult, to adjust to the environment. While it's benefiting them, example, my own kid, I have moved around multiple, geographies of India. I was in Bangalore, went to Chennai, from Ahmedabad to Pune to Gurgaon, back to Bangalore. So I've
Oh
moved
my
around
God.
multiple
Yes.
locations. And
Yes.
all
Yes.
this happened in less than, 15 months, 18 months, 24 months. yes, there was some amount of pressure which my kid also had to go through, because
True.
it was a different geography, different culture, different pattern of education, different style of teaching.
Yes,
So
yes. And
this had,
leaving behind friends, that becomes more challenging.
exactly, exactly.
Yes, yes, sir.
Yeah. So this were yes, but I agree. It also have some positive benefits as well. You know, a kid can learn, you know, Hindi if he stays, you know, he or she stays only in some part of a geography. They will learn only the regional language there. But moving around different places, it gives them an opportunity to look at a different geography, different cultural aspects of it. Yes, both sides. I'm talking about, Dr. Nazia.
Yes, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. It was an insightful session, sir. Thanks a lot.
Sorry, ma'am, if you are speaking, you are mute. You're on mute.
I'm sorry. Uh, Sir, there's Devish Chandra. Are you there, sir?
Yes,
Devish
yes.
Chandra Bhattacharya? Would you like to put your question, or you want me to read your question, sir? Devish Chandra, sir Bhattacharya. Yeah, his question is because it is in IITs, IIM students even go for suicide under pressure. What a teacher can do under these circumstances. Was I audible, Ravichandra sir?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, there's a question on the chat box, please.
Okay.
Yeah,
Is it from Mr.
Devish
Devashish?
Devashish Chandra Bhattacharya. Yeah,
Okay.
sir, would you like to ask? You
So,
can ask if it is you want to be clarified.
okay. So I'll give my answer in a very simple way. I think yes, the mental well-being imbalance which we have talked about in our previous sessions as well is quite common. It doesn't mean that it's applicable only to few institutions or only to few children. It's quite common today. You can also see people from IIMs or IITs also, you know, trying or making an attempt to commit suicide. That's largely because of pressure to perform. You know, it's also because of social validation. These are the two major reasons which have come out, Mr. Devashish. It goes without saying, but yes, at least the number of cases in IITs and IIMs are significantly low compared to the other institutions, to the other academic institutions. That's largely because, you know, there are a lot of institutions who don't even get a proper campus placements as such. So the students, you know, end up in being in the open market and getting exploited. So that puts a lot of pressure. So when a student, you know, goes through this traumatic experience, you know, that's where the mental well-being is kind of imbalanced and it becomes quite negative. So I mean, there is also a continuation of a question to this. What a teacher can do under the circumstances. Yes, it's important that, you know, we diagnose it at the right time. You know, there are students, you know, who would need an attention from a faculty members or from a parent. It's equally important, you know, to counsel them. If we cannot handle that or we are not experts in that, it's always important to route them to the right professional agency. There are a lot of assistance program institutions, you know, which are there in India, which are a subject matter experts, which are available. Even it's also being promoted by the government now. You know, if you look at you know, government of Kerala and government of Karnataka, they also have a toll-free number, you know, where you can dial up and, you know, speak to a counselor as such. So there are a lot of ways through which, you know, we can route them to the professional help.
So there was one more question from Fernandez Joseph, sir. there's a lot of stigma on mental illness in India, unlike abroad. If you have a student coping it up, how as a faculty you can deal with it?
Yeah. So good or bad, yes, that's the truth that no, the mental illness is actually a stigma. So people do not upfront come. This is not only in the institutions, but in the corporations also we face that problem today. We have a partner, an employee assistance and a partner who is available with us, but lot many people who come forward in telling that no, I have a problem. So it's important that we understand what a person is going through. It's important that as a faculty you understand that what a student is going through, and it's also important to connect with the student to understand more about the background, about the family, about the issue or a concern he or she is facing. So yes, truth here is that people only don't talk about the mental illness here in India. So we have a long way to go, but it's important as a faculty, as a parent, as an organizations to understand what an employee student is going through, and then put them across to the right professional help as such.
Thank you, sir. Madhukar, sir, would like to ask your question? I can see you. If you want to unmute, you can unmute and ask. Madhukar Shirsikar. His question is on is government policy. Sir, you would like to ask? I can see you. You can unmute yourself and ask questions directly, sir.
So I think you're on mute. I understand your question.
Sir
Yes.
is mute.
Yeah.
Madhukar, sir, you're on mute. Is the government policy responsible for depression of students? That's his question.
So
Is
answer.
government policy? Yeah, was I audible?
Yes, ma'am. You are audible.
Yeah. Okay. Madhukar, sir, you have mute.
Yes, in a way, answer is yes and no as well. With the national education policy, which has just come up now, I think we have a long way to go. We will wait for the changes which the government is going to make. There have also been talks at a national level, even at CBSE level, also to change the curriculum, okay, to make it more relevant, to make it more, to make it more relevant to the current requirement as such. Hopefully, we should see some light by mid of this year, and then I think I think that's all my comment is.
Yes, Kishore, sir, you can also ask your question.
Dr. Kishore, I think answer is yes. We need to move into a large families. The smaller families are not working out, to be honest now. And parents having only single kid and being in isolation, it's not working out. If there is an opportunity, I think we all should move to the larger family concept. I think that will bring down. Now, problem is even at my family, I have only one kid. So he has high energy levels. He wants to play with us. Unfortunately, we don't have time. We don't have energy. So where will a kid go? So that's a problem today. Yes, that's a reality, and that causes some amount of a mental issue.
Yes, I agree with you, Dr. Ravi. Yeah, Dr. S.L. Samrat also has got some question. S.L. Samrat, would you like to ask your question? So his question is, how can students place himself in virtual working environment in future successfully? If any, please insight teachers' role in the new normals.
So, sir, would you like to elaborate it a little further?
Samrat sir, are you there? SL Samrat sir?
Hello.
Yes, sir.
Sorry, I was out
Yeah.
of app.
Okay, sir. He'll
My question with today's my question for today's expert is, sir, how can students place himself in virtual working environment in future successfully, if any? Also, please insight teachers' role in the new normal to prepare them well?
So let me give you my perspective since I'm representing the corporation. The future is going to be very, very different than what it was or what it is today. Many corporations have actually tasted the success of virtual working. If you look at the statistics in India itself, I think majority of the companies, the IT-based industries in India, the
I don't drink tea. It's okay. Huh?
no, sorry. So if you look at the landscape of the corporations in India itself, majority of the IT companies are all working virtually now. And this,
Yes.
they in fact started off in the month of March itself. And because of this, the UK strain or the South Africa strain, the companies have extended it. There are many companies who have already given up their real estate. They said 80% of the population will now work out of home. If you have read the articles which TCS, Infosys, major companies have published in India, it looks like the future is going to be where employees will be asked to stay at home and do a virtual working. Okay. Now, having said that, what is going to happen to the current set of students who are supposed to get graduated? Now, there are, if you look at the articles in the recent past, in the last 1.5 months time, the companies always have said that they are going to go aggressive with their plans now. That means they are going to induct a lot of employees. The new hiring will happen. But the moment the new hiring happens, now, if it is an IT-based industry, an employee will join. Maybe he or she may not have an office, but will continue to stay at home and do virtually. That's going to be the new normal. Okay. So even if you look at even the corporations also, many corporations where we used to have except anything which is doing manufacturing, everywhere else you can implement this virtual working. And that's exactly what the corporations have also been exploring now. So the future most preferably will be working out of home itself. We don't know, but this is all speculation, but we all hope that at least 40 to 50% in India will continue to stay at home in future. Okay.
It is the present arrangement from the corporate side, or the corporate may feel that it may more beneficial for future in hiring the pass out students. What's their plan? It's a long-term plan or a short-term plan in the COVID situation?
See, I think the business revival is still happening in many of these sectors. And I wouldn't say that we have completely revived in post-COVID situation. Yes, there are a lot of industries which are still grappling. There are small establishments which have shut shop because they're not able to run down the business going forward. But however, if you look at the large corporations, they have sustained in this, in the pandemic situation. Now, one of the input which I can share, because I'm closely involved and I'm part of the many industries, fraternity groups, I can all say that the hiring plans have still been on the same lines as it used to be in the past. That means the numbers may not decline. If it is a major corporation, the numbers will not decline. But the ways of working will change. That means, if the 10,000 people were getting hired by companies XYZ, it will continue to be 10,000. May not be 10,000, but equivalent to 10,000. So they may not go down in their hiring plans, but what is important is we need to all understand that going forward, there may not be an offices at all. It will be largely a virtual working. Now, the mental health being or the mental well-being, which we have been talking about, while I've been talking about the students, now it is more significant, more relevant, and more applicable for people in the corporate world today. That's largely because people do not have at the time limits now. The day starts at 7 o'clock in the morning, goes on till 11 o'clock, or at times and it goes on till midnight also. You never know. So the future is going to be that, Mr. Samrat. Sorry. So to answer to your question, what is a insight or give us an insight about the teacher's role in the new normal? I think is more to prepare them for the future.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, sir, for your nice elaboration. Thank you so much.
I think we can take one more question. We are running short of time. Shailendra Singh, you want to share your views or something like that? Aradhana Malhotra is also there. Aradhana's question is, sir, how can we improve the students' attendance in the virtual classes? Because the development of student is necessary and that they will join the classes voluntarily.
I mean, all I can say, Madam Aradhana, is that this has been a struggle not only for a few institutions, for most of us as well, even in corporates as well. That now, how do we draw people and how do we engage them? I think we need to find out a better innovative ways, come out with a quiz, come out with some kind of an engagement program where we make sure that the student attendance improves in the virtual classes. If it's just a one way or one side delivery, then all of us are struggling and we continue to struggle that way. So the innovative ways of engagement has to be kicked in.
I think there are no more questions, sir. Yeah, so we wind up for the day. We certainly are privileged to have Dr. Ravichandra T amidst us. He has covered very nicely the role and challenges of teachers in the students' development, how faculty needs to develop, and how today we are not only a source of inspiration or giving information, but we have to be multitask. He has also covered various challenges that students face today, like mental health, technology, career, demographic, and social validations. He also very nicely and in a simple way explained the role of teacher, how a teacher is a role model. Sir, I would put on records that Dr. Ramnaya sir is my role model, sir. Being a role model, a counselor, a mentor, or a development agent. He also discussed very nicely about the characteristics of millennial students. What are the psychological theories he has covered up? I, Dr. Sonia Rajput, really feel privileged today to propose the vote of thanks to Dr. Ravichandra for this wonderful session, which was very interactive. On behalf of FDP, organizing committee, the cyber family, and the participants, I would like to say, sir, your presentation was indeed very informative and interesting. I express my sincere thanks and appreciation for accepting our invitations just in a phone call, sir. And sharing, gracing the session and sharing your enlightening knowledge and valuable opinions with our participants. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, participants, for the wonderful interactive session. I hope all of us are benefited with this. So we meet tomorrow at 10:15. You have to register, and 10:30 we'll be starting with the tomorrow session. Thank you. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you, ma'am. Thanks to all the participants. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Hello, Ravi